unique shape, with a pencil-thin cabin and vast delta wings, enables her to race across the sky at 3 kilometers every 6 seconds. By 1:30, all the passengers are checked in for their supersonic trip. The pilot, Captain Christian Marty, is already in the cockpit preparing for the flight. The holidaymakers are in good hands. Marty is one of Air France's most experienced pilots. His air traffic controller is Gilles Laugelin.
This particular day I was not supposed to work. One of my colleagues the day before asked me for a transfer of shift, so he did my morning shift and I did his afternoon shift.
Gilles Laugelin is the controller responsible for Concorde's departure. During his pre-flight check, Captain Marty learns engine number 2 has a technical fault. A small part needs replacing. It isn't serious, but with Concorde, safety is always paramount. After 40,000 flights and 900,000 flying hours, there has never been a fatality. At 4:35 p.m, Concorde is ready to depart. In the control tower, Gilles Laugelin clears Air France flight 4590 for takeoff on runway 26 right. Captain Marty lines up the plane at the start of the runway, ready to release the power of Concorde's 4 Rolls-Royce engines. The plane accelerates down the 4,000-meter runway. It passes through 320 kilometers per hour. Computer graphics recreate what happens next. For Gilles Laugelin, it's a moment of sheer horror.
Suddenly, I saw a flame just behind the body of the aircraft. So I jumped on my mic to say, Air France 4590, you have flames behind you.
Captain Marty can't see the flames, but accelerating through 328 kilometers per hour, he's committed to the takeoff. There's only 2,000 meters of runway left, but Concorde needs 3,000 meters to stop safely.
After the speed, whatever is the situation, the plane has to take off.
At 4:43 and 15 seconds, Captain Marty pulls on the control stick. Concorde takes to the air. Captain Marty struggles to gain altitude, but he can't see the flames engulfing the left wing. The sickening sight is caught on camera by the wife of a truck driver. It's the only video footage ever captured showing Concorde on fire, and will prove to be a vital link in the investigation. At 4:43 and 30 seconds, Concorde struggles to remain in the air. It's only 30 meters off the ground, and the crippled plane is on a collision course. The town of Gonesse and its 25,000 people lie directly in its path. Concorde's left wing disintegrates. The plane stalls and plunges to the ground. At 4:45. The moment every air traffic controller dreads.
I said, Air France 4590, do you hear me?
Air France 4590, me recevez-vous?
I said it twice.
Air France 4590, me recevez-vous?
There was no answer.
The supersonic jet, loaded with fuel and 109 people on board, crashes on top of a hotel on the outskirts of Gonesse. A fireball tears through the building. Within 8 minutes of the crash, dozens of fire engines and ambulances raced to the scene. Rescue attempts are futile. 113 people die, 4 from the hotel, and 109 passengers and crew on Concorde. 3 generations of the Ike family perish. The children's grandparents wanted to treat the family to a holiday of a lifetime and booked the Concorde flight. School teachers Klaus and Margaret Frenson saved for 20 years to fly on Concorde. Most of the bodies are burned beyond recognition, and forensic pathologists can only identify victims by their dental records.
One of the more difficult things was the identification of my father and his partner. One has to say, nothing much remains of the passengers after an air crash. That was difficult.
In 36 countries and over 296 stores, 600
travel a reality. Never had a fatal accident until this moment. It takes just 120 seconds to shatter that perfect record. Now, by rewinding the events of that fateful day and going deep into the investigation, we can reveal what really happened. The French Bureau of Air Accidents sends their top investigators. Their data can piece together the deadly chain of events to find out what really caused this tragedy. Nothing is off limits. Did pilot Captain Marty make a fatal error? Or was there a fault hidden within the plane? At Gonesse, investigators divide the Concorde crash site into a grid to allow a meticulous search. They photograph and tag everything found in each section. It's a painstaking process that takes 4 weeks. One of the world's finest examples of modern engineering is now just a tangled heap of charred rubber, aluminium, melted plastic, and fractured hydraulics. But among these burnt remains lie crucial clues to the cause of the crash. Within hours, the French Bureau of Air Accidents team recovers the black boxes, devices carried on all airliners to record important technical data, and crucially, the pilot's conversation from the cockpit. They focus on the last-minute engine repair that Captain Marty orders just before takeoff. Concorde returned from New York the previous day with a faulty thrust reverser on engine number 2. Thrust reversers help slow the plane down after landing. Investigators analyze the flight data recorder closely, but find no evidence that a faulty thrust reverser could cause the accident. The pressure to find an answer increases. French authorities ground all Air France Concorde flights. The spotlight is now on the 120 seconds from the start of final takeoff. The black boxes indicate that everything is normal until Concorde reaches 323 kilometers per hour. Data recorders reveal a sudden loss of power in both engines under the left wing. Then, an important new clue. French investigators find several fragments of tyre on the runway. One of them weighs 4.5 kilograms. Tests confirm they belong to Concorde. It's a significant lead. Investigators dig deeper. They re-examine all the debris found on the runway and make the most important discovery of the investigation. this 43-centimetre mystery strip of metal. Matched to the damage on Concorde's tyre. It's a perfect fit. Suddenly, the whole inquiry now depends on the source of the metal and where it came from. It takes 5 weeks of painstaking detective work, comparing it to the thousands of parts that make up all aircraft. Then, a breakthrough. They discover the metal strip comes from the engine mounting of a DC-10. The flight log from Paris reveals a Continental Airlines DC-10 took off 5 minutes before Concorde. They track down the plane to Houston, Texas, and incredibly find the engine has a missing part. It's the metal strip fitted 16 days earlier during maintenance on the DC-10. Investigators now have a strong theory about how the strip of metal contributed to the crash. 81 seconds before the crash, Concorde AF4590 is travelling at 323 km per hour down the runway. The tyre hits the metal strip. The tyre explodes and a massive 4.5 kilogram chunk of rubber flies at high speed up into the wing. But Concorde's fuel tanks are in the wings, and the delta-shaped wing isn't designed to withstand such an impact.
This sort of eventuality had never been foreseen in trials. It was estimated in all the trials for certificating the aircraft in the first place that if a tyre exploded, the pieces of tyre that would actually come away from the wheel would be about 1 kilogram in weight.
The chunk of rubber that hits Concorde's wing weighs nearly 5 times as much, 4.5 kilograms. No one planned for that level of impact. The large rubber fragment of the tyre matches the dent on the wing. But surprisingly, the wing isn't punctured at that point. So if the heavy chunk of rubber didn't puncture the wing, what made the fuel leak out?
The piece of tyre which actually hit the wing and did the damage was so big and so flat that although it was so heavy, it didn't go through the wing at all. And it caused such a shock wave to go through the fuel that it actually blew a plug of wing tank skin outwards. The shock was that bad.
When the rubber chunk hits the wing, it sets off a pressure wave that finds the weakest joint in the fuel tank. Fuel bursts out of the tank. 75 litres pour into the engine every second. But even fuel gushing over the engine needs a spark to ignite. Where did the spark come from? The cockpit voice recorder reveals that pilot Christian Marty calls for the undercarriage to be raised, but it stays locked open. The video footage taken of the doomed flight provides further evidence. The undercarriage is in the down position, so something stopped the wheels from retracting. The most likely explanation can be seen in this computer simulation. Shrapnel from the burst tyre flies up into the landing gear bay and severs power cables. The undercarriage is now stuck in the down position. Exposed wires whip around in the gale force airflow. If they make contact, they'll spark. As fate would have it, they do. The leaking fuel ignites, and at that moment, Concorde becomes a flying bomb. But What must it have been like for Captain Marty in the cockpit? He can't see the flames from his seat. All he knows is that Concorde loses power in engine number 2 at the moment of takeoff. 1 second later, the control tower alerts him to the fire. Cockpit voice recordings reveal that at 4:43 and 22 seconds, the engine fire alarm sounds, and 3 seconds later, the captain shuts down engine number 2.
The drill for a fire warning is that you shut the engine down and cut off the supply of fuel to it to try and then fire the fire extinguisher for that engine to try and put the fire out.
Concorde is now 53 seconds from disaster. At 60 meters, it's too low to turn around, so Captain Marty tries to fly the crippled plane to the nearest runway at Le Bourget Airport, just 5 kilometers away. But then, a new problem. The fire is now so intense, Concorde's wing is melting and disintegrating.
At the rear end of the wing on Concorde are the controls known as elevons, which enable the pilot to point the aircraft's nose up or down. The fire was so fierce that the rear structure of the aircraft was being virtually evaporated. The pilot's essential controls were being destroyed.
In the cockpit, the captain battles with the controls, trying to gain speed and height, but he's overwhelmed by the fact that the wing and its controls are disintegrating. "33 seconds. The engine fire alarm sounds again, and remains on for the duration of the flight. Captain Marty runs out of options. Even the runway at Le Bourget, now only 3 kilometers away, is out of reach. With just 11 seconds left, the control tower hears Christian Marty's final words. Too late. No time. 3 seconds. Concorde can no longer hang in the air. It stalls and begins to roll leftwards. All 100 passengers and 9 crew on board are killed, as well as 4 people in the hotel. Concorde, the world's only successful supersonic airliner, has its perfect 25-year safety record destroyed in just 120 seconds. Jörg Meyer's father died in the crash.
I certainly miss him. He leaves a gap for me that can't be filled. What makes it more terrible is the fact that he didn't die from a natural illness, but in a horrible accident.
The Paris disaster is the beginning of the end for Concorde. 3 weeks after the crash, all Concorde flights are grounded. Air France and British Airways, the 2 airlines that fly Concorde, have to make major safety modifications. Tyres are strengthened so they remain functional even when punctured by a 30-centimetre blade. Engineers encase the fuel tanks with bulletproof Kevlar liners to resist puncture. The electrical harnesses in the main landing gear bays are reinforced. Concorde never regained her former glory. 14 months after the crash, Concorde passenger flights resume, but it's too expensive to maintain and upgrade the aging fleet. Passenger numbers decline sharply. On October 24th, 2003, Concorde carries passengers for the last time. The first era of supersonic passenger travel is at an end. Concorde is now just a museum relic. That fateful July afternoon in Paris is due to a critical chain of events. A rogue strip of metal on the runway punctures a tyre, propelling part of the wheel into the wing. A pressure wave causes fuel to erupt from the tank and debris to fly into the undercarriage, where it severs an electrical wire. A spark ignites, triggering an inferno at the point of takeoff. From then on, Concorde is doomed. A chain of events no one could have predicted ultimately brings about its destruction.